The great hall of Nexus Prime Station stretched for nearly a mile. Its curved walls covered in the flags and symbols of 100 different species. Ambassador Linda Morrison had walked these halls for 15 years, and she still felt small beneath the towering architecture that aliens had built long before humans discovered fire. She was 58 years old, with gray streaking through her dark hair and lines around her eyes that came from decades of smiling when she wanted to scream. Today would test that skill more than most days. The Galactic Council chamber sat at the heart of the station, a circular room where representatives from the major species gathered to discuss trade, borders, and the occasional war. Linda took her seat in the human section, a small area near the back that matched humanity's status in galactic politics. Minor species sat in the back. That was simply how things worked. Highblade Zorthon entered the chamber with the confidence of a predator walking into a room full of prey. The Vexari were reptilian, standing 7 feet tall, with scales that shifted between green and black depending on their mood. Zorthon's scales were dark today, which meant he was feeling aggressive. Linda had learned to read Vexari body language years ago. It helped her prepare for the insults. The council recognizes the representative from the Vexari Dominion, announced the Luminari moderator, its body glowing with soft blue light. Zorthon stood and looked directly at Linda before speaking. I wish to address the matter of human expansion into the Kepler corridor. Their colony ships move too close to Vexari space. This is a provocation that we cannot ignore. Linda kept her face neutral. The Kepler corridor was neutral territory according to every treaty the Council had ever signed. Humans had every right to establish colonies there. But rights meant little when the species-claiming violation had 300 warships and humans had, according to official records, only 42. The human colonies in the Kepler corridor are fully compliant with Galactic Treaty 7, Linda said calmly. We submitted our colonization plans to the Council 3 years before settlement began. No objections were raised at that time. Zorthon made a sound that served as Vexari laughter. Perhaps we did not object because we did not believe humans capable of actually reaching those systems. Your ships are slow. Your weapons are primitive. We assumed your plans were merely dreams. Several other representatives made sounds of amusement. The Thryn clicked their mandibles in what passed for their species' version of laughter. Even the Meridians, floating in their water-filled pods, rippled with what might have been amusement. Linda had heard worse. She had stood in this chamber 2 years ago, questing an investigation into the Vexari attack on Kepler 7, where 12,000 human colonists died in a single night. The Council had expressed sympathy and promised to look into the matter. Nothing happened. Nothing ever happened. Perhaps we could request formal arbitration, Linda offered. A neutral party could review the treaty language and determine whether human activities in the corridor violate any existing agreements. Arbitration. Tasted the word like it was something unpleasant. Humans always want to talk, to negotiate, to delay. This is because you are weak. The weak always prefer words to action, Linda smiled. It was not a warm smile. The Vexari Dominion has launched 17 military operations against human colonies in the past 30 years. We have responded to each incident with diplomatic complaints and requests for arbitration. If preferring peace to war makes us weak, then I accept that description. The chamber fell quiet. Linda had just publicly listed Vexari aggression in front of the entire council. It was not something she usually did. Diplomats were supposed to maintain pleasant fictions. Zorthon's scales shifted to pure black. You would do well to remember your place, human. Your species has existed in this galaxy for barely half a century. The Vexari Dominion has ruled these stars for 3,000 years. We were building empires while your ancestors were living in caves. I remember our place quite well, Linda replied. We sit in the back of this chamber, because that is where minor species are assigned. We accept trade restrictions that limit our economic growth because those are the rules for newcomers. We bury our dead and rebuild our colonies because that is the cost of being small in a galaxy full of larger powers. We remember all of this, High Blade, every single day. The session ended without resolution, as sessions usually did. Linda gathered her documents and walked toward the exit, ignoring the stares from other delegations. She had shown too much emotion. That was a mistake in diplomatic circles. Her communication device buzzed before she reached the door. The message was brief and encrypted with the highest security protocols available to human technology. She read it twice before the words made sense. Vexery fleet attacking New Kansas. 3 million colonists. Defense forces engaged. Requesting guidance. Linda stopped walking. New Kansas was an agricultural world, home to families who had volunteered to spend their lives growing food for distant Earth. They had no military value. They were farmers and teachers and children playing in fields of alien wheat. She turned back toward the chamber. Zorthon was still there, speaking with the Thrin representative about something that made both of them laugh. He caught her eye and smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. He already knew. He had known during the entire session. Every word about the Kepler corridor had been a distraction, while his ships moved into position. Linda walked out of the chamber and found a private communication room. She needed to contact Admiral Kevin Brooks aboard the Constellation. Kevin was 62 years old and had commanded Earth's defense forces for 20 years. He remembered the days before first contact, when humans only had each other to fight. "I received the report," Kevin said when his image appeared on the screen. His face was tired, but calm. "New Kansas Defense Force is engaging the Vexery. They have 12 ships against 47. What are their chances?" Kevin was quiet for a moment. "With current engagement protocols, they will lose. The colony will be destroyed. 3 million dead, give or take." Linda closed her eyes. "And with other protocols?" "That depends on authorization from the Secretary General. You know the rules, Linda. We have been following them for 30 years. We do not reveal our true capabilities unless Earth itself is threatened. 3 million people, Kevin. I know." His voice carried the weight of every death he had been unable to prevent. "I have been carrying these numbers for 2 decades. Every colony we lost. Every ship we sacrificed to maintain the illusion. I remember all of them." Linda thought about the council chamber. She thought about Zorthon's smile and the laughter of species who considered humans barely worth noticing. She thought about 30 years of patience, of documentation, of waiting for a moment that might never come. "Contact Secretary General Webb," she said finally. "Tell him what is happening. Tell him I believe we are running out of time to pretend." Kevin nodded slowly. "And if he disagrees? If he orders us to maintain current protocols?" Linda looked at the wall where a small photograph showed Earth as seen from the moon, blue and white and green, spinning alone in the darkness. "Then we follow orders," she said quietly. "That is what we have always done. That is who we are." She ended the call and stood in silence, waiting for news from a world she had never visited, about people she would never meet, who were dying while the galaxy laughed. The Vexery fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 47 warships arranged in a crescent designed to surround and destroy. Commander Virith stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue-green world of New Kansas grow larger on his display screens. "Human Defense Force detected," his sensor officer reported. 12 vessels. Mostly cargo ships converted for combat. Their weapons are primitive, Commander, short-range missiles, and basic rail cannons. Vareth made a sound of contempt. "Humans always send farmers to do a warrior's job. Begin bombardment of the primary population centers. Leave nothing standing." 300 miles away, Captain Denise Hartley watched the same display with different eyes. She was 34 years old, with short brown hair and hands that never shook, even when everything around her was falling apart. Her grandmother had survived Kepler 7 by hiding in a grain storage facility for 3 days while Vexery soldiers searched for survivors. Denise had grown up listening to those stories. "Enemy fleet is moving into attack position," her tactical officer reported. "They outnumber us almost 4-1. Standard engagement protocols give us a 12% survival probability." "Standard engagement protocols," Denise repeated softly. She had been waiting for this moment her entire career. Every officer in Earth's defense force knew about the protocols. The real ones, the ones they trained for in secret facilities, hidden from galactic sensors. They called it the longest con in human history. Her communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from Earth. The encryption signature was one she had seen only twice before in her career. Both times during training exercises. Authorization code Omega Sunset confirmed, her communication officer announced. Captain, we are cleared for Protocol 7. Denise stood from her command chair. Her crew was looking at her, waiting for orders. Most of them were young, recruited from colonies that had never known peace with the Vexery. They had joined the military knowing they were outgunned, outmatched, and probably doomed. They had joined anyway. All ships, this is Captain Hartley. Activate Protocol 7. Authorization, Omega Sunset. Today we stop pretending. Throughout her small fleet, things began to change. Hull panels slid aside to reveal weapons systems that had been hidden for decades. Engines that had deliberately operated at reduced power suddenly flared to full capability. Targeting computers that had been running simplified software switched to their true programming. The transformation took 90 seconds. When it was complete, Denise's 12 ships no longer looked like converted cargo vessels. They looked like predators. Enemy fleet is in range, her tactical officer said. His voice was different now, excited rather than afraid. Commander, their shields are configured for our old weapons. They have no idea what we can actually do. Then let us educate them, Denise replied. All ships engage. On the Vexery flagship, Commander Vareth was the first to notice something wrong. The human ships were moving too fast. Their acceleration curves were impossible for the engine types his intelligence reports described. Before he could issue new orders, the first human weapons fired. The shots were not missiles or rail cannon rounds. They were beams of focused gravitational energy that ignored shields entirely. Vareth watched in disbelief as 3 of his escort ships simply crumpled inward, crushed by forces their designers had never imagined. Return fire, he screamed. All ships concentrate fire on the lead human vessel. His fleet responded with everything they had. Missiles, plasma cannons, particle beams, all directed at Captain Hartley's ship. The weapons struck a defense screen that should not have existed, according to every intelligence report the Vexery had ever collected on human technology. The screen held without any visible strain. It's impossible, Vrath whispered. The battle lasted 18 minutes. Vexery ships died in groups, unable to land effective hits on enemies that seemed to dance between their formations. Human weapons cut through Vexery armor like it was paper. By the end, 47 Vexery warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris, and all 12 human ships remained operational. Denise Hartley stood on her bridge, surrounded by crew members who were still processing what had just happened. They had trained for this. They had believed in the secret protocols. But believing something and seeing it work were very different things. Send a message to New Kansas Colony, she ordered. Tell them the threat has been neutralized. Then establish a secure channel to Earth Command. Admiral Brooks needs to know what happened here. Far across the galaxy, on Nexus Prime Station, Ambassador Linda Morrison received the battle report 12 hours later. She read it 3 times, feeling emotions she had suppressed for 15 years of diplomatic service. The Luminary representative requested a private meeting. Linda met him in a small chamber away from the main council halls. The Luminary were among the oldest species in the galaxy, beings of pure energy who had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. We have seen the recordings from New Kansas, the Luminary said. His light patterns shifted in ways that Linda had learned to recognize as deep concern. Those weapons, that shield technology, those engine signatures, none of this matches your registered capabilities. Linda said nothing. How long? The Luminary asked. How long have humans been hiding their true strength? Linda considered lying. Diplomats were supposed to maintain fictions to preserve the delicate balance of galactic politics. But the battle at New Kansas had changed everything. The fiction was already dying. Since first contact, she answered. 31 years. The Luminary's light patterns became chaotic, something Linda had never seen before. You discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. Not 50, as you claimed. It's closer to 180 years, actually. Our scouts found the galaxy before the galaxy found us. They reported a civilization built on domination and exploitation. The strong devoured the weak. The Vexeri were not unusual in their behavior. They were simply following the established pattern. So you pretended to be weak. We pretended to be exactly weak enough to be dismissed, but not weak enough to be destroyed. We filed complaints through proper channels. We accepted humiliating trade restrictions. We buried our dead and rebuilt what was destroyed. And while we did all of this, we watched. We learned. We prepared. The Luminari was silent for a long moment. The Council species have made many assumptions about humanity. We believed you were primitive, aggressive perhaps, but limited by inferior technology. We allowed the Vexeri to test you because we wanted to see how you would respond to pressure. We know, Linda said. We have always known. Every surprise attack was detected well in advance. Every political manipulation was tracked and analyzed. We simply chose not to respond with force because we hoped, perhaps foolishly, that the galaxy might eventually choose peace over dominance. And now, Linda thought about the 12,000 dead on Kepler 7. She thought about the 3 million colonists on New Kansas who had almost joined them. She thought about 30 years of smiling while her people died. Now we are running out of patience, she said. The Vexeri will not stop. Their culture does not allow them to accept humans as equals. They will escalate until we are destroyed or they are. We have tried every peaceful option available to us. Perhaps it is time to try something else. The luminary's light dimmed slightly. The Council will demand explanations. The other species will want to know why humans deceived them for so long. Did not deceive anyone, Linda replied. We simply allowed others to believe what they wanted to believe. There is a difference. One that the galaxy may need to consider carefully before making accusations. She stood and walked toward the door. Thank you for meeting with me. I expect the coming days will be educational for everyone. The Luminari watched her go, its ancient mind processing implications that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. The news spread through the galaxy. It's like fire through dry grass. Battle footage from New Kansas appeared on information networks across 1,000 worlds, showing 12 human ships destroying a Vexeri fleet nearly 4 times their size. Analysts from every major species watched the recordings frame by frame, trying to understand weapons they had never seen before. The Vexeri Dominion responded with denial. Their official channels claimed the footage was fabricated, a human propaganda effort designed to intimidate their enemies. Highblade Zorthon addressed his people from the capital world, promising that the might of the Dominion would crush these human lies. Then 3 more. Vexeri fleets disappeared. The first vanished near the Kepler corridor. 35 ships that stopped responding to communications and never returned to port. The second was a patrol group in the neutral zones, 18 vessels that simply ceased to exist. The third was a supply convoy with military escort. 40 ships that left Vexeri space and never arrived at their destination. Not a single distress call. Not a single survivor. Not a single piece of wreckage large enough to identify. Highblade Zorthon demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Council. His scales had turned a shade of black that no one had ever seen before, a color that meant fear disguised as rage. He stood in the Great Chamber and pointed directly at Ambassador Linda Morrison. These humans have committed acts of war against the Vexeri Dominion. They have destroyed our fleets with weapons that violate every treaty on military technology. I demand that the Council take immediate action against this rogue species. Linda rose from her seat. She moved slowly, taking her time, letting the chamber watch her approach the central speaking platform. In her hand, she carried a single data chip. The Council recognizes the human representative, the Luminari moderator announced. Thank you. Highblade Zorthon speaks of human aggression. He demands action against my species for defending ourselves against military attacks. I find this interesting. Perhaps the Council would like to review some historical context. The display screens around the chamber came alive with images and documents. Linda let them play without commentary as representatives from every species, Watched in silence. Kepler-7, 14 years ago. Vexery warships in orbit, firing on civilian structures. Bodies in the streets of the colony's main city. 12,000 dead. The hospital ship Mercy, 11 years ago. A Vexery patrol claiming the ship was carrying weapons despite full medical markings. 200 patients and staff killed when the vessel was destroyed. Diplomat Richard Crane, 9 years ago. Assassinated on a neutral station during peace negotiations. Vexery intelligence operatives identified but never prosecuted. The images continued. 47 incidents over 30 years. Trade ships seized. Colonies bombarded. Civilians murdered. Each incident had been reported to the Council. Each complaint had been filed through proper diplomatic channels. Each request for investigation had been denied or delayed or simply ignored. 217,000 human beings, Linda said when the display finished. That is the total number of our people killed by Vexery aggression over the past 3 decades. We documented every death. We requested justice for every victim. We received nothing but condescension and delay. The chamber was absolutely silent. Even Zorthon had stopped posturing, his scales shifting between colors as emotions he had never learned to hide played across his body. So when Highblade Zorthon speaks of human aggression, I must ask, what aggression is he referring to? The aggression of defending our colonies against attack? The aggression of no longer allowing our people to die without consequence? The aggression of being exactly what the galaxy always feared we might become? The Thrin representative spoke up, clicking mandibles in the pattern that meant formal inquiry. What does humanity want? What are your terms for ending this conflict? Linda turned to face the insectoid diplomat. We want the attacks to stop. That is what we have always wanted. Peace. Security. The right to exist, without being treated as prey by species who consider themselves our betters. Nothing more. Nothing less. And if the attacks do not stop? Linda was quiet for a moment. She thought about the hidden fleet that Admiral Kevin Brooks was assembling in deep space. 500 warships and 3,000 support vessels. More firepower than most species commanded in their entire military? She thought about the weapons that Earth's scientists had developed in secret laboratories. Technologies that made the gravity beams used at New Kansas look primitive. Then we will do what any species does when faced with extinction, she said. We will survive. Whatever that requires. Zorthan finally found his voice. You threaten the entire council. You reveal hidden weapons and secret fleets, and then demand that we accept your ultimatums. This is not diplomacy. This is blackmail. No, Linda replied calmly. This is honesty. For 30 years, humans pretended to be less than we are. We did this because we hoped the galaxy might eventually choose peace. We were wrong. The Vexery have made clear that they will never accept our existence. Very well, we accept this truth. We are simply asking the rest of the galaxy to make a choice. Do you stand with those who murder civilians, or do you stand with those who defend themselves? The Meridian representative rose from her water-filled pod, speaking through the translation devices that allowed aquatic species to communicate with air breathers. The Vexery have been council members for millennia. Humans have been known to us for barely 50 years. You ask us to abandon ancient alliances based on 30 years of documented complaints? I ask nothing, Linda said. Humanity will handle the Vexery threat with or without galactic support. We are simply explaining our position so that there are no misunderstandings. Any species that chooses to support Vexery aggression will be treated as a participant in that aggression. Any species that remains neutral will be left in peace. These are not threats, they are facts. Zorthon slammed his clawed hand against his speaking podium. The Vexery Dominion does not negotiate with inferior species. We do not accept ultimatums from creatures who were building mud huts while we ruled the stars. If you want war, humans, then you will have war. Total war. Every ship we command, every weapon we possess, every soldier in our armies, we will burn your worlds and scatter your ashes across the void. Linda looked at him with something that might have been pity. Highblade Zorthan, on behalf of the United Earth Coalition, I accept your declaration of war. I will inform my government immediately." She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving chaos behind her. Admiral Kevin Brooks received her message 2 hours later. He stood on the bridge of the Constellation, watching as ships emerged from their hiding places throughout human space. They came from asteroid fields and abandoned moons, from deep space stations and camouflaged orbital platforms. Ships that the galaxy had never suspected existed. 500 capital ships, 3,000 support vessels, weapons that could crack planets, and shields that could withstand the combined firepower of entire fleets. "The Secretary General has authorized full military response," Kevin announced to his command staff. "The Vexari have declared total war. We are going to give them exactly what they asked for." He paused, looking out at the stars that humanity had explored in secret for nearly 2 centuries. "Send the final warning," he ordered. "Let them know what is coming. Let them have one last chance to choose differently." His communications officer nodded and began the transmission. Across the galaxy, every species with the technology to receive it would hear humanity's last offer of peace. Kevin knew it would be rejected. The Vexari could not surrender without destroying their own social order. Their culture was built on dominance and submission, on the strong ruling the weak, admitting that humans were their equals, or worse, their superiors. It would collapse everything they believed about themselves. But the warning had to be sent anyway. That was who humans were. They offered mercy even when they knew it would be refused. "How long until the Vexari fleet assembles?" Kevin asked. "Intelligence suggests they will gather their full strength within 14 standard days," his tactical officer replied. "Over 2,000 warships. It will be the largest fleet in Vexari history." Kevin nodded slowly. 2,000 ships against 500. Any other species would consider those impossible odds. Any other species did not know what human engineers could build when they stopped pretending. Secretary General Marcus Webb was 73 years old and looked older. The weight of leading humanity through 30 years of deliberate humiliation had carved deep lines into his face. He stood before the cameras in the United Earth Coalition's broadcast center, knowing that his words would reach every corner of the galaxy. People of Earth and all human colonies, citizens of the Galactic Council species, members of the Vexari Dominion. I speak to you today not as a politician, but as a representative of a species that has been patient for a very long time. He paused, gathering himself for what came next. For 30 years, humanity has followed every rule of civilized conduct established by the galactic community. When our colonies were attacked, we filed formal complaints. When our citizens were murdered, we requested investigations. When our diplomats were assassinated, we asked for justice through proper channels. We did all of this because we believed in the possibility of peace. We believed that even in a galaxy built on dominance and exploitation, there might be room for something better. Marcus looked directly into the camera. We were wrong. Not about the possibility of peace, but about the willingness of others to choose it. The Vexari Dominion has now declared total war against humanity. This is their right under galactic law. But it is also their final mistake. For 30 years, we have pretended. We have hidden our true capabilities because we hoped they would never be needed. We have allowed other species to believe us primitive and weak because we thought weakness might protect us better than strength. We were wrong about that too. So let me be clear about what happens now. We are done pretending. To the Vexari people, your government has chosen war. Your military has gathered the largest fleet in your history. They believe they are coming to destroy us. They are coming to die. We do not want this. We have never wanted this. But we will not allow our people to be slaughtered while we beg for mercy from those who have none to offer. You have 12 standard days to remove your military forces from our borders and sue for peace. Your government has chosen war. We are offering you, the people, the chance to choose differently. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity asks nothing of you. We will not request allies or aid. We will not seek revenge against those who ignored our suffering. We will not demand that you choose sides in a conflict you did not create. We ask only that you watch and remember, and perhaps learn something about the nature of patience. Marcus stepped back from the cameras. His hands were shaking slightly. He had just committed humanity to a war that would either establish them as a galactic power or see them destroyed. There was no middle ground left. Across Vexery space, Highblade Zorthon watched the human broadcast with contempt. Patience? These creatures spoke of patience as if it were a virtue. The Vexery knew better. Patience was the excuse of the weak. The strong took what they wanted. That was the natural order of the universe. How long until our fleet is assembled? He demanded. 6 more days, Highblade. We have gathered every ship capable of combat. 2,300 warships. 16 million soldiers? It is the greatest military force in Vexery history. Zorthon smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Good, we will show these humans what happens to species that forget their place. We will teach them a lesson that the galaxy will remember for 1,000 years. The Vexery fleet gathered in the Korvax system, a dead region of space, chosen specifically as the staging ground for their assault. For 6 days, ships arrived from every corner of the Dominion, forming a wall of metal and weapons that stretched across millions of miles. On the 7th day, the human fleet arrived. Captain Denise Hartley commanded the lead squadron. She had been promoted after New Kansas, given authority over 30 of Earth's most advanced warships. Behind her, Admiral Kevin Brooks commanded the main battle group from the Constellation. And behind him, 400 more ships waited in formations that no Vexery commander had ever seen. Enemy fleet detected, her sensor officer reported. 2,300 vessels. They outnumber us nearly 5 to 1. Denise nodded calmly. Open a channel to their flagship? The communication display flickered, and Highblade Zorthon's face appeared. His scales were shifting between dark colors, excitement mixing with anticipation. So the humans have come to die, Zorthon said. I expected you to flee. I am pleased to be wrong. This will be more satisfying than hunting down your colonies one by one. Highblade Zorthon, Denise replied. By order of the United Earth Coalition, I am required to offer you one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and seek peaceful resolution to this conflict. You have 30 standard minutes to respond. Zorthon laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge of his flagship. 30 minutes. I will give you 30 seconds to surrender. After that, there will be no mercy. Very well. We will consider your response and proceed accordingly. The channel closed. Denise turned to her crew. All ships, battle stations. Weapons free in 31 minutes. The wait was the hardest part. 30 minutes of watching the Vexery fleet organize itself for attack. 30 minutes of final checks on weapons and shields and engines. 30 minutes of thinking about what was about to happen. When the timer reached 0, Admiral Brooks spoke over the fleet-wide channel. All ships engage. The Battle of Korvax would be studied by military historians for centuries. It was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration. Human ships moved through the Vexery formation like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in ways that violated every known principle of physics. They fired weapons that bent space itself, crushing warships from the inside out. They deployed shields that absorbed enough firepower to crack moons without showing any strain. The Vexery fought back with everything they had. Missiles, plasma cannons, boarding pods, ramming attempts. Nothing worked. Their weapons could not hit enemies that seemed to know where every shot would land before it was fired. Their ships could not catch opponents that moved faster than light within the battlefield itself. 4 hours after the battle began, it ended. 2,300 Vexery warships reduced to debris. 16 million soldiers dead or scattered across the void. The greatest military force in Vexery history. Destroyed in less time than it took to hold a council session. Human losses, 0 ships destroyed. 17 vessels damaged. 43 crew members injured. No fatalities. Captain Denise Hartley looked at the display screen showing the expanding field of wreckage. Somewhere in that debris was the flagship that had carried Highblade Zorthon. He had refused to surrender even as his ship broke apart around him. That was the Vexery way. Death before dishonor. Send a message to the Vexery homeworld, she ordered quietly. Inform them that their fleet no longer exists. Inform them that they have 9 days remaining to accept our terms for peace. And inform them that if they choose to continue this war, we will come for their world next.
Oh.
The message went out. Across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humanity for 30 years received the battle footage and tried to understand. What they were seeing in the council chambers on Nexus Prime, the Luminari representative watched the recordings in silence. Humanity had not lied about being patient. They had simply waited until patience was no longer useful. Now the galaxy would learn what humans could do when they stopped waiting. The Vexery homeworld had never known fear. For 3,000 years, their species had expanded across the stars, conquering and subjugating every civilization they encountered. Their capital city was built to celebrate that history, with monuments to fallen enemies and statues of warriors who had brought entire species to extinction. Now that city was silent. The people walked through streets without speaking, watching the skies for ships that had not yet arrived. Their fleet was gone. Their military leadership was dead. Their entire understanding of the universe had collapsed in 4 hours of impossible battle. High Blade Zorthon was dead. But the Vexery government continued. A council of elder military officers took control, arguing among themselves about how to proceed. Some wanted to fight to the last citizen, preferring extinction to surrender. Others pointed out that surrender was not what the humans demanded. They had asked only for peace. "This is a trick," insisted Commander Vrush, one of the hardliners. "The humans want us to lower our defenses. Once we agree to their terms, they will destroy us anyway. That is what we would do in their position." "Perhaps that is the problem," replied a younger officer named Krath. "We assume humans think as we do, but they do not. They had us completely defeated at New Kansas, at Korvax, at every engagement. They could have pressed their advantage. They did not. They offered peace instead, because they are weak. They lack the will to finish what they started." No. Krath pulled up the battle footage from Korvax for the 100th time. They are not weak. They are something else. Something we do not have a word for. On the 8th day after the battle, the younger officers made their move. They arrested Commander Vresh and his supporters, charging them with leading the Dominion to destruction. It was not exactly a legal process. The Vexery law had always respected the right of strength to replace weakness. On the 9th day, the new government sent a message to the human fleet. "We accept your terms. We request negotiations." Ambassador Linda Morrison received the message aboard the Constellation. She read it 3 times, hardly believing that it was real. After 30 years of war and death and patient waiting, the Vexery were asking to talk. "Kay want to negotiate on their homeworld," she told Admiral Kevin Brooks. "A show of good faith." Kevin shook his head. "Too dangerous. If they have hidden weapons or traps, we could lose you. I appreciate the concern, but I think we need to meet them somewhere else. Somewhere that makes a statement." They met on the bridge of the Constellation itself, surrounded by the fleet that had destroyed Vexery military power in a single afternoon. Ambassador Linda Morrison sat at one end of a simple table. The Vexery delegation, led by a young officer named Krath, sat at the other. "You could destroy us," Krath said without preamble. "Your ships could reach our homeworld and ours. You have weapons that could crack our planet like an egg. Why do you not simply finish what we started?" Linda considered the question carefully. It was the question that every species in the galaxy was asking. The answer would define humanity's place among the stars for generations to come, because we remember what we were, she said finally. "Before we found the stars, humans spent most of our history fighting each other. We had wars that killed millions of our own people. We built weapons that could have destroyed our entire civilization. We came very close to ending ourselves before we ever left our homeworld." Krath listened without interrupting, his scales shifting in patterns that Linda see. "Owled, not quite red. We survived that period because some of us chose to be better. Not perfect, not wise, just better. They built institutions designed to prevent war. They created treaties and laws and systems of justice. They made mistakes, many mistakes, but they kept trying. And eventually, they succeeded. By the time we reached the stars, we had learned that cooperation creates more than conquest. That patience builds more than aggression. That mercy is not weakness. These are strange ideas for warriors. We are not warriors. We are survivors. There is a difference. Linda leaned forward. When we first discovered the galaxy, we saw species locked in endless cycles of domination and subjugation. We saw the strong devouring the weak, just as we once devoured each other. We could have joined that cycle. Our technology was already superior to most species we encountered. We could have built an empire. Why did you not? Because we had already tried empire. It did not work. It never works, not in the long run. Empires collapse. Conquered peoples rebel. Strong become weak, and the cycle continues forever. Linda shook her head. We wanted something different. We wanted to see if the galaxy could learn what humanity had learned. That is why we pretended to be less than we are. We hoped that by showing patience, by enduring attacks without retaliation, we might demonstrate a different way. You hoped to teach us, Krath said slowly. By letting us hurt you, we hoped. We were probably foolish. We hope is what humans do. Even when it makes no sense. Even when it costs us everything, we hope. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The terms were surprisingly mild, exactly as Linda had promised. No territory seized, no reparations demanded, no military occupation of Vexury worlds. Earth asked only for formal acknowledgement of the attacks, a guarantee of non-aggression, and the establishment of a joint historical commission to document what had happened and why. The commission, Krath asked on the final day. What purpose does it serve? Memory, Linda replied. We want both our peoples to remember this conflict accurately, not as propaganda or mythology, but as history. It's the mistakes that were made, the opportunities that were missed, the lives that were lost on both sides. If we forget, we risk repeating the same mistakes. Memory is how we learn. The treaty was signed in a simple ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Linda Morrison and Krath pressed their hands to the document, human and Vexury together. In the weeks that followed, the other council species began reaching out to humanity. The Luminari requested formal cultural exchanges, wanting to study how humans had hidden so much for so long. The Thrin asked permission to access human historical archives, fascinated by the species that had fought so many wars against itself and survived. Even the Meridians, who had barely acknowledged humanity's existence before, sent their first ambassador to Earth. Secretary General Marcus Webb retired after the treaty signing. He was too tired to continue, worn down by 30 years of carrying secrets and making impossible choices. His successor was a younger woman who had grown up knowing what humanity could really do, who had trained for a day when pretending was no longer necessary. Admiral Kevin Brooks remained in command of the fleet for another 5 years before passing authority to the next generation. He spent his final years writing a history of the hidden war, documenting the decisions and sacrifices that had kept humanity's true strength concealed for so long. Captain Denise Hartley rose through the ranks to become the first human admiral to command a joint fleet with former enemy species. She never forgot her grandmother's stories about Kepler-7, but she found that remembering did not have to mean hating. The Vexury she worked with were not the same Vexury who had murdered her people, holding them responsible for their ancestors. Crimes would have made her no better than those ancestors. Ambassador Linda Morrison remained at her post on Nexus Prime for another decade, watching as the galaxy slowly transformed around her. It was not a fast process. Species that had spent millennia building empires did not abandon those patterns overnight. But there were changes. Small ones at first, then larger. Treaties that actually meant something. Investigations that actually happened. Justice that was actually served. On the 10th anniversary of the treaty signing, Linda stood on an observation deck with Kevin Brooks, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon. They were both old now, carrying the weight of everything they had seen and done. Do you think they understand? Kevin asked. The other species. Oh, do you think they finally understand what we were trying to show them? Linda considered the question. She thought about the young Vexury officers who were now studying at human universities. She thought about the Luminari researchers who were writing papers about human psychology. She thought about the small but growing movement among council species calling for reform of galactic governance. Not yet, she said finally. But they are learning. We are patient. We have always been patient. We can wait for them to figure it out, and if they never do, if the galaxy goes back to its old ways, Linda smiled. The same smile she had worn through 30 years of diplomatic humiliation. Then we will be ready. We will always be ready. That is what humans do. We hope for the best, but we prepare for the worst. And we never, ever stop trying to make things better. They stood together in silence, watching their homeworld spin through the darkness, and waited for the future to arrive.